This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed vows to lead frontline combat against rebels. Children in combat. New UN report raises a red flag over a high number of child soldiers in Africa. And Kenya and South Africa address visa challenges as they seek to ease travel between the two countries. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first, here's Uche Okoronkwo with the day's business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. The International Monetary Fund issues conditions to fund South Sudan's ailing economy. And a South African think tank calls for an export-driven policy to spur economic recovery. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And let's begin with the latest developments in Ethiopia. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says he'll lead frontline combat against rebel forces. The announcement comes as the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF, rebel group gains ground in its advance towards the capital Addis Ababa. Conflict between forces allied with the TPLF and the Ethiopian National Defense Forces erupted over a year ago in the country's northernmost Tigray region. Rebel forces have recently advanced southward, prompting Ethiopia's parliament to approve a 6-month state of emergency to contain the opposition. The latest reports say that the United Nations will evacuate family members of international staff by Thursday. Well, let's cross over to CGTN's Girum Chala. He's in Addis Ababa for us with the very latest. Girum, it's nearly 24 hours since Prime Minister Abiy tweeted that he would start leading the army in the battlefront from today. What are you hearing?
Well, Beatrice, here in Ethiopia, war in the north has continued. The Prime Minister a few hours ago has joined that battle after he promised to lead the Ethiopian National Defense Force, the militia, the special force and the others in those battlefields. At the moment, we know that there are reports coming out saying that the war between the TPLF force and the Ethiopian force, the Ethiopian National Defense Force, has intensified. There were serious battles about 250, 270 kilometers away from the capital, Addis Ababa. The National Defense Force are reporting that their attacks have resulted positive outcomes, and the Prime Minister's move actually has also motivated so many people, including celebrities, former athletes, former generals, and also the entire Ethiopian population, according to local media and also our observation, to go into the war field so that they can fight for the country's sovereignty, as per the call from the Prime Minister. TPLF is saying that they will continue fighting, they will continue advancing to the capital city until the current government is removed. Beatrice.
Well, Prime Minister Abiy's statement came after a ruling party meeting that discussed a new strategy in the war. What resolutions were reached at that meeting?
The ruling party, Prosperity Party, meeting was held with the presence of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and was concluded yesterday, and the most important resolution out of the many, Beatrice, is concluding the war, which they say which posed a sovereignty issue, a territorial integrity issue on the country, to conclude it as soon as possible. They said that they'll finish the war in a shorter amount of time by mobilizing the people of Ethiopia, so that the developmental activities can continue through the leadership of the Prosperity Party. So most of the leadership, by the way, after the Prime Minister announced his move of entering the war himself, have also vowed to join him. Some of them, we have heard, have joined him so far, some ministers included. So the party's decision is to finish this war, security threat in the country, according to them, as soon as possible, so that developmental activities can be carried on afterwards.
Well, Girum, we are also receiving reports that the UN will evacuate family members of international staff from Ethiopia by Thursday. What more do you have on that?
Well, including the UN, the United States and perhaps a few other Western countries believe that the security situation in this country is deteriorating, and so they kept on motivating their citizens to leave Ethiopia as soon as possible using commercial flights. The United States is a front runner, as I was saying, and many other countries have also followed suit, Israel and others included. At the same time, the United Nations, we have heard that it has evacuated some of its staff. It is also advising its staff to leave the country before things get perhaps deteriorated even further. That's according to them. But you should also understand that the government and its authorities are advising against it. They say they still maintain the fact that Addis Ababa is a secured city. It's one of the most important diplomatic cities in the world, and it is secure. There is no threat against any foreigner. There is no evidence of a threat against any civilian in general terms, but the UN has decided to do so, and other countries are also doing the same. On the contrary, Beatrice, there are also countries which are still keeping their citizens in this country with no security, except the fact that they are advising them to follow local authorities' decisions and also directions. Otherwise, what we know is there are many countries and citizens staying in this city thinking that it's safe. But for the UN and others, the decision seems to be otherwise, and it's still they are still evacuating out of Addis Ababa.
Gerom Chala joining us there from Addis Ababa. Thank you. Well, let's now turn to Sudan, where Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok was reinstated on Sunday, nearly a month after he was ousted by the military. In addition to his reinstatement, Hamdok signed a 14-point agreement with Military Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. Political leaders and analysts have expressed their thoughts on the agreement.
The situation now is very, very critical. I think that Hamdok gave life or oxygen to al-Burhan with this procedure. Al-Burhan was completely besieged by the international community and completely besieged from the inside by a comprehensive rejection of this coup. But now there's a shift in the opinion of the international community. It appears, therefore, that the international community, the military, and Hamdok are now facing the Sudanese people.
This agreement, which has found great public and popular support, will put an end to the political crisis. It represents a new platform for launching and ensuring the civil democratic transition, which requires us to move forward by learning from the practices of the previous period and building on that, and looking forward to a bright future through which we can achieve the goals of the glorious December Revolution.
If Hamdok wants to build a bridge of trust between him and the street, he must take real steps to ensure that his return is different from his predecessors, that all decisions taken by al-Burhan must be reviewed and turned against the constitutional document, and that things return to how they were before October 25th. So this issue is what Hamdok will do in the coming days, especially since the form of the agreement he made with al-Burhan is still vague and unknown, and these ambiguities need to be revealed.
A UNICEF report is raising the alarm over the recruitment of child soldiers in West and Central Africa. The report noted an increase in the number of children recruited by government forces and armed groups in the regions. It also raised concern over the number of children falling victim to sexual violence.
Over the past 5 years, 21,000 children have been recruited by government forces and armed groups in West and Central Africa. Over 2,000 children were victims of sexual violence, while more than 3,500 were abducted. This is
the violations against children's rights increased 50% between 2015 and 2020, and 35% just between 2019 and 2020. So you see a huge acceleration of the numbers of violations.
Since 2005, the UN's Children Fund has had a system in place to monitor and report grave violations committed against children. These include recruitment, abduction, rape, and attacks on schools and hospitals. The DRC, which is mired in several conflicts, recorded the highest global percentage of child soldier recruitment. The country accounted for 71% of all child soldier recruitment. However, UNICEF noted that over the past year, Mali and the Central African Republic represented the fastest increase in the recruitment of child soldiers.
Increased number of armed conflicts and the COVID pandemic exacerbating underlying vulnerabilities, children suffered a lot.
Beyond the use of child soldiers in conflicts, the report also highlighted the plight of girls recruited or abducted by armed groups. UNICEF estimates they account for 30 to 40% of children in the hands of armed groups. They're also more likely to be raped or face sexual violence.
That violation is absolutely underreported. And as much as there's more boys, about 70% in those recruited and used, although 30% girls is enormous when you think of it. We don't speak about them too often. On the rape and sexual abuse, the majority are girls. But these girls have immense hesitation even when they escape, even when they are reintegrated, gotten out of the armed group through the handover protocol. Many hesitate to ask for support. Many hesitate to use the services because of the immense stigma associated with what happened to them.
The UN is calling for parties involved in conflicts to end and prevent violations against children. It is also calling for perpetrators of these violations to be held accountable. Astatal, CGTN.
Uganda has intensified surveillance operations along its borders as a measure against terror threats in the country. Over 100 people have so far been arrested since bomb explosions went off in the capital, Kampala, a week ago. 7 people were killed and 37 injured. Majority of the wounded were police officers. Isabel Nakiria reports.
Ugandan police say they've killed 7 suspected terrorists while 4 suicide bombers died during the attack in Kampala. The force says it's hunting down more suspects.
We have intensified operations along our borders to prevent illegal crossings. And since these operations began, like His Excellency indicated, a total of 106 suspects have been arrested, and including those who are involved in terrorist financing and persons who are involved in the mobilization and incitement of vulnerable Ugandans into the ranks of the ADF.
Authorities in Uganda claim the attack in Kampala was carried out by the Allied Democratic Forces, which is said to be an affiliate to ISIL. The ADF is a Ugandan rebel group based in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, but there are reports that some of its fighters have crossed back into the country. President Museveni, in an address to the nation, called on all ADF rebels in the country to surrender or risk being killed. The head of state also indicated that he is talking to the DR Congo president to enable Ugandan forces to cross into the DRC and fight the ADF. The country remains on high alert as police continue with raids to dismantle terror cells. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and his Kenyan counterpart, President Uhuru Kenyatta, have announced a joint task team that has been set up to ease travel and address any visa-related challenges between the two countries. This emerged during Kenyatta's state visit to South Africa at the invitation of Ramaphosa. The 3-day visit will continue until Wednesday. CGTN's Jolisa Njamel has more.
South Africa and Kenya share long-standing, mutually beneficial relations that predate Kenya's historic support for the struggle against apartheid and colonialism here in South Africa. On this particular visit, the two leaders were accompanied by senior cabinet ministers from both countries. The visit is geared towards deepening the existing mutually beneficial ties between Kenya and South Africa.
President Kenyatta and I have reaffirmed the strategic importance of bilateral relations between our two countries and reiterated our desire to elevate the nature of our relationship, which would include the conclusion of a strategic partnership agreement.
They also explored new areas to deepen the fraternal ties between Nairobi and Pretoria.
We have witnessed today the signing of 8 agreements covering a wide range of issues, including health cooperation, diplomatic consultations, training and cooperation in fields of tourism and air services, all very key to both our countries.
During their meeting, the two leaders also shared perspectives on various issues of mutual importance, such as continental and international developments. Presidents Ramaphosa and Kenyatta also acknowledged the signing of the strategic partnership framework between South African Airways and Kenyan Airways. While acknowledging that partnership, the two leaders also reflected on how trade between the two nations need to be more balanced. South Africa exports billions of US dollars worth of goods to Kenya. This is against imports worth only millions of US dollars from Kenya.
We therefore welcome the announcement that South African Airways and Kenya Airways have agreed on a strategic partnership framework towards the creation of a pan-African airline group that draws on the capabilities and the advantages of our two nations. We will be working together to identify Kenyan export products for which there are great growth opportunities in South Africa. We're also committed to investing more in each other's economies.
What I am particularly happy about is the level of commitment at the highest level possible that we have seen today in terms of reversing that situation and to have a much more balanced situation prevail in terms of trade between our two countries. A much more balanced and increase in terms of volume, in terms of volume of goods, but also in terms of the amount of actual transactions that are actually done between our two countries.
President Kenyatta has other engagements while here. President Kenyatta's program includes a visit to Transnet Engineering, a visit that will allow South Africa an opportunity to showcase its capabilities in supply and maintenance of rail-related technology. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Experts warn South Africans to brace for a fourth COVID-19 wave in December. And Ethiopia gets back artifacts looted by British soldiers more than 150 years ago. South Africa will likely be hit by a fourth wave of infections in December, but the impact might not be as severe as during earlier surges. That's according to health experts there. South Africa has the highest number of coronavirus cases on the continent. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
Scientists working with the government have predicted that a fourth wave of coronavirus infections could hit South Africa mid-December at the earliest, heading towards early January.
What we do is we work on predictions and looking back to try and get an idea of what's happening forward. So we know a number of things. One is there will be a fourth wave. We know that the intervals between these waves are not exactly the same, but they come with relative frequency. So you get a short respite of about 3 or 4 weeks, and then the next wave arrives.
The health ministry says the next wave will likely be less severe than previous resurgences because about a third of South African adults are fully vaccinated, and between 60% and 70% of the population may have already been infected. South Africa's 40% vaccination rate among the adult population is also expected to provide protection, but vaccine hesitancy remains a concern.
It's an interesting dynamic. In the beginning, we were chasing older people and specifically males because the numbers were lower. Right now, as a percentage of the total number of males in the category over 50, men are more vaccinated than women. So the catch-up has been very good amongst older men. In the younger categories, so people under the age of 40 are extremely poorly vaccinated compared with the older people.
Even though the COVID-19 cases are once again increasing, South Africa is in a much better place than in the last 16 months at least. The country has managed to move from a high of 20,000 new cases in July to just about 700 presently. But Dr. Crisp warns that this might just be a ruse.
So what tends to happen is that the virus burns itself out, and the speed at which it will burn itself out of a wave depends on how many of us are vaccinated and how much immunity is in the community that is being exposed to the virus. So if we suddenly start exposing people who have never been exposed to the virus or have only been done in passing to the virus in communities now, we will create the next wave. You know, all waves go up, they reach a peak and they come down again. Don't have any false illusions. It's up to 700 again at the moment in a day, and it's a cluster in Tshwane in the Gauteng area, and that may well be the start of something. So don't get too excited when the numbers come down. That's just what they do.
Since South Africa launched the vaccination program, more than 23 million people have received at least one dose, and close to 13 million people are fully vaccinated. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Nigeria has started a COVID-19 vaccination campaign to cover 50% of its eligible population by January 2022. It's part of the government's push to scale up vaccination efforts towards achieving its herd immunity target. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reports.
Remember, no one is protected and safe until we are all protected and safe.
A key message to Nigerians from the Secretary to the Government, Boss Mustafa, as he kick-started the countrywide COVID-19 inoculation drive. It's the latest in Nigeria's move towards increasing the number of vaccinated citizens by making vaccines more accessible.
Through this mass COVID vaccination campaign initiative, arrangements have been made to ease all known bottlenecks to access, because the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency has expanded vaccination sites. These sites include public health facilities, private health facilities, mobile vaccination posts, and mass vaccination sites such as schools, markets, shopping malls, recreation centers, motor parks, worship houses, and other public places that attract.
Only around 3.3 million eligible Nigerians have been fully vaccinated, representing 2.9% of the total population expected to receive the shots. To achieve herd immunity, authorities say that over 111 million people would need to be inoculated. Despite the increase in supply of COVID-19 jabs, vaccine hesitancy still remains a major challenge.
We are concerned that there are Nigerians who continue to be hesitant, despite the federal government fulfilling its commitment to providing COVID-19 vaccines free of charge to all Nigerians.
In the meantime, health authorities continue to reassure citizens that all quality control checks and safety protocols are observed in the administration of the COVID-19 jabs.
The federal government is committed to providing safe and efficacious COVID-19 vaccines and dispensing them backed with accountability and transparency. All vaccines are tagged and tracked by NAFDAC to ensure that quality and potency is maintained in the supply chain.
The government hopes to use the mass vaccination campaign to quickly increase the number of fully vaccinated people in the country. Not only will it move Nigeria towards achieving herd immunity, it's also expected to help fast-track social and economic recovery. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Elsewhere in Europe, French Prime Minister Jean Castex has tested positive for the coronavirus. His office made the announcement Monday as Europe continues to report the world's biggest surge in cases and deaths. German Health Minister Jens Spahn is warning the country's citizens by the end of the winter they'll be vaccinated, cured or dead. The US is issuing a do not travel warning for Germany and Denmark. Austria on Monday became the first nation in Western Europe to reimpose a full nationwide lockdown. India has reported its slimmest rise in new COVID cases in 1.5 years. It recorded just over 7,500 infections following major festival gatherings in recent weeks. Experts say the relatively low numbers are due to vaccinations and antibodies from prior infections. During the summer, India recorded as many as 400,000 per day. Total cases are over 34.5 million, with the death toll over 466,000. And the recent COVID outbreak on the Chinese mainland is easing, with just 5 new local infections reported on Monday. 4 of them were in Liaoning province, 1 in Yunnan province. Some measures are being lifted in other parts of the country. In Sichuan province, all medium and high-risk areas have been downgraded to the lowest levels. And we return to Ethiopia, where 13 cultural artifacts which were stolen a century and a half ago have been returned to Ethiopia following months of negotiations. The items were looted following a battle between the British and Ethiopian empires. CGTN's Mohammed Abubakar reports.
The 13 stolen Ethiopian artifacts include an ornate processional cross and a richly colored triptych depicting the crucifixion of Jesus. They were taken from Ethiopia by British soldiers after a battle between the British and Ethiopian empires in 1868.
In England, there are plenty of treasures looted from the war. It was not possible to return all of them. However, these treasures are the biggest so far in number and in kind. This is the first time this quantity of treasure is returned home.
Ethiopia says it is still negotiating with the British Museum in London for the return of 12 tablets. The antiques are reportedly replicas of the Ark of the Covenant and are regarded as sacred by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church.
Our country's ancient civilization history, artifacts, fingerprints of indigenous knowledge, culture and value have been looted through war and smuggled out illegally. At this moment, countless treasures of ours are found in various countries' museums, research institutes, and in the hands of individuals.
British museums have long resisted campaigns for the return of artworks, often citing legislation that bans them from disposing of their collections. But pressure has increased, and last year the British Museum said it would loan some works to Nigeria for a new museum due to open in 2023.
The significance of these treasures coming home is immense. Our country is a historical ancient civilization. Our treasures are scattered here and there. The fact that our treasures and our historical items are scattered all over will diminish our country's identity internationally. Therefore, this is part of making the image of our country strong by collecting our scattered treasures home and abroad.
The restitution also comes as conflict between Ethiopia's federal government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front continues to rage. The Ethiopian ambassador to England says that cultural artifacts are being destroyed and looted in the fighting. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
Eating insects is considered a taboo in many Western countries, but health experts from the Food and Agriculture Organization are encouraging people to eat some edible insects for their highly nutritional value. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, people have been eating insects as a regular part of their diet for centuries. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa sent this report from Kinshasa.
It's an insect hunting expedition in the DRC capital, Kinshasa. Women and children search for crickets, or makelele as they're locally known, under the ground. Susie Yongo is a mother of 5 who has been selling crickets for more than a decade. She buys them from women in this Nsele neighborhood and sells them in the city.
Crickets are so delicious. I just don't know what I can compare them with. When you taste them, you'll keep coming back for more. I've been able to educate my children from selling these insects.
The DRC is among the leading insect-eating countries in Africa. The practice is known as entomophagy. UN agencies like the Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Food Programme are advising people to eat insects to improve their nutrition.
Insects are a very good source of protein, healthy fats, but also they include some micronutrients such as iron and calcium. So definitely a good addition to anybody's diet. Here in the Democratic Republic of Congo, WFP has been promoting with mothers in particular, for instance, the idea of adding ground caterpillars in the porridge for small children.
For many Congolese, the advice of the WFP is akin to preaching to the converted. Traders at Kinshasa's Zigida market are always doing brisk business, selling caterpillars, crickets, and other edible insects. Hawa Lutete loves eating insects. She's chosen to prepare a meal of crickets this time round. It's a delicacy at her home.
Crickets are a natural food that we get from under the ground. They really taste nice. They are rich in proteins and other nutrients.
Besides the nutritional value, the insects provide a source of livelihood for many women in the DRC. These crickets are crunchy and quite tasty. They've been marinated with some spices that have made it a mouth-watering treat. Scientists say crickets also play an important role of helping to balance the ecosystem by breaking down plant material in the soil. They're in plenty here during the rainy season. The chirping sound they make earned them the name makelele, which means noise in Lingala and Swahili. Nutritionists are urging Congolese to rear the insects in a more sustainable manner in order to reduce the hunger crisis in parts of the country. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, let's now go to Uche for the latest business news. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. The International Monetary Fund issues conditions to fund South Sudan's ailing economy. And a South African think tank calls for an export-driven policy to spur economic recovery.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, the International Monetary Fund says that support to South Sudan's ailing economy is pegged on the government's willingness to open an accountability probe. The Washington-based lender wants President Salva Kiir's government to account for past loans, as well as prosecute the corrupt and improve financial discipline and transparency in use of public resources, especially earnings from oil. Now, IMF Director of its African Department, Abebe Selassie, insisted on the conditions in a meeting with President Kiir and his finance minister in Juba last week. The hope for South Sudan is now pegged on a positive report by the country's Auditor General, who has been tasked with investigating how funds have been spent in the recent past. Well, let's head to Tanzania now. President Samia Suluhu's government is set to receive a zero-rated $372 million loan from the IMF in order to help support COVID-19 pandemic relief measures. Now, the latest IMF loan will be issued through the fund's rapid credit facility. It's all part of a $567 million package released in September under a blended rapid credit facility and rapid financing instrument program. Now, according to the IMF, recent reporting of COVID-19 data in Tanzania has indicated an increase in the number of cases. That's amid a third wave of the virus. Growth in the East African nation reportedly decelerated to 4.8% in 2020, and economic performance is expected to remain subdued in 2021. Now, South Africa's economic recovery and development strategy, which was launched by President Cyril Ramaphosa 12 months ago, may not be the optimal approach to the country's recovery. That is according to a new report prepared by a think tank. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola. He has the story from Johannesburg.
The report, prepared by the Centre for Development and Enterprise, suggests that localization, one of the pillars of the new policy as an approach to industrialization and development, won't achieve its goals.
We see this as an anti-export strategy and a strategy that will not increase South Africa's competitiveness as an economy, nor will it increase our competition within the economy. So we think this is the wrong priority and it's a misguided policy.
The country faces several challenges, the biggest being its 12 million unemployed people. Bernstein says this policy is misguided.
It seems attractive to say we want to encourage government to spend money on domestic firms and we'll hold on to the jobs that we have. But we think this is short-sighted, that it fails to appreciate. There will be some firms that benefit from this policy, but it fails to appreciate the costs to government, to the economy as a whole, to consumers, and to our competitiveness.
Part of South Africa's challenge is its distance from all major developed markets, but there's a potential solution closer to hand.
You have a plus 50 country policy program called the African Continental Free Trade Agreement in place, which is trying to promote exactly this. And this would be a first step in the direction then of policy coordination. How would our industrial policy correspond with regional policy? And the African Continental Free Trade Agreement gives some big clues on that.
Another aspect that hasn't been sufficiently investigated in this industrial policy is the skills requirement to make the policy work.
Are they available? Can they be imported? Here, South Africa needs to look to its scarce skills, immigration policies. There is a squaring up to that, but I would venture not broad enough and not quick enough.
The Centre for Development and Enterprise is calling for focus on certain key issues.
So get the environment right, fix the labour market regulations, not wholesale, but carefully calibrated reforms. Fix our education and skills system. So these are much higher priorities in our view.
South Africa's economic growth rate is languishing at the moment, and government policy needs to change and change quickly in order to take advantage of any opportunities. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, Libya has announced plans to construct a solar plant with Total Energies. The country's Minister of Oil and Gas, Mohamed Oun, announced those plans. He was, of course, speaking at the launch of the 2021 Libya Energy and Economy Summit. Now, the North African nation is heavily reliant on oil. OPEC estimates the sector represents about 69% of the country's foreign export earnings. In addition to working with Total to build a solar plant, Oun announced plans to increase Libya's oil production.
The agreement that was signed today is the agreement of Total Energies, which submitted a proposal to establish a 500 megawatt solar power plant on the basis that construction will be completed and its costs will be paid over a period of 25 years.
And to the United States now, U.S. President Joe Biden has renominated Jerome Powell to lead the Federal Reserve on Tuesday. Now, Biden also nominated Fed board member Lyle Brainard as the vice chair. The White House says that the two officials are expected to shift the focus of monetary policy to job growth, and controlling inflation risks will still be another top priority for the central bank. The dollar hit a new peak since early 2017 against the yen after the announcement. Now, with Christmas approaching, many are getting ready to indulge and celebrate. From twinkling lights in the centre of London to an enormous pine tree in a historic Brussels square, cities around the world are busy preparing for Christmas. This is the heart of the British capital, which is decked out for the festive season. For the first time, 20 streets in London city centre have coordinated to switch on their illuminations on the same day. In Belgium, an 18-meter tall Christmas tree has been installed in Brussels' Grand Place. It is the first step in the process of setting up the Christmas market. The huge pine tree is a symbol of hope. And in the U.S., iconic New York store Bergdorf Goodman unveiled its annual holiday window displays. The store representatives there say the decorations convey the joy of people coming together after having been separated, of course, because of the pandemic. Well, that's all for now in Africa Live Biz, but coming up on Global Business Africa, Nigeria's central bank kept its benchmark interest rate unchanged today at 11.5%. This, of course, is the 7th straight time the MPC has kept the rate steady. We'll be live in Lagos to analyze this move and much more at the top of the hour. For now, it is back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on Current Affairs. Here's what's coming up. We'll be telling you how social media influencers are bridging the gap between Chinese and Arab cultures.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In recent years, a number of Chinese and Arabic-speaking influencers have been attracting many followers in the Arab world. And as their popularity grows, their influence in bridging Chinese and Arabs together has become stronger. Many produce videos about China and bridge the cultural gaps between the world's two oldest civilizations. Here's Adel Mahroui with more details.
Mohammed Abu Zaid is a digital marketeer. As part of his job, he follows the social media trends in the Arab world. That's how Abu Zaid first got to watch posts by Chinese influencers. He then fell in love with the content.
In the last 2 years during the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a surge in Chinese influencers who create content in Arabic. China has been a country we've known so little about, so watching influencers talking about Chinese culture in Arabic was an eye-opener to Arab viewers about a part of the world they were not so much engaged with.
One of those influencers is Faihat Wang. She says that since she was a child, she fell in love with a collection of folk Middle Eastern tales called A 1001 Nights. Her passion about the Arab world drove her to study classical Arabic in college. In 2017, her work brought her here to Egypt, where she began creating online content about Chinese cuisines and restaurants. Her posts caught the attention of local television channels who helped her attract hundreds of thousands of followers.
Misconceptions about China and the Chinese people increased after the COVID-19 pandemic. As a Chinese citizen, I believe I'm responsible for spreading truthful information about China to reduce any common misunderstanding about my country among our Arab friends. That led me to focus my content on information about the coronavirus and the protective measures needed so that everyone will be safe.
Fayhat makes sure to respond to almost all of the people commenting on her posts. The 37-year-old Chinese influencer says she feels rewarded whenever she's able to change the perspective of even just one person about China. She has more than 1 million followers. There are dozens of other Chinese influencers who create content in Arabic. Unlike Fayhat, most of them focus on entertainment. With millions of Arab followers, their impact to bring people of these nations together is maybe more effective than the usual diplomatic channels. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. Tanzania's Amputee football team ready for the Africa Cup of Nations in Dar es Salaam.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Tanzania's national amputee football